All right, good morning. I'm very happy you are here because, it's Tuesday, it's cold, it's the end of Medium. You can tell I have Medium voice, This happens when you speak all the time and do other things, which I won't mention here. But thanks very much for coming by. Let's start at the top. This is my first time I'm using the iPad to present. Because when I do a lot of presentations speaking about the future of media, and one thing I don't like is that you always have to follow the order of the slides, right? Which is kind of annoying for me and annoying for the audience because it's like being a robot eventually. You just click and go on, right? So now I don't really have an order. I'm going to skip around. So if you have a question, you can ask me right away. If you have input, I should leave something out, talk more about something else. You can also ask me. But I will actually start at the top here. Just put this cable down here. Okay, so briefly what I do. Many of you may say, what in the world is a futurist? I don't know if that word even exists in French. I suppose in some way it does. But I'm a futurist. I wrote a book called The Future of Music in 2005, and very sadly, people are still buying this book because it's an old book and it's still true. Basically, what I do is I look at trends and developments about 5 years into the future, and I help companies to make up new business models. I also work with people, government, organizations. Okay, this has nothing to do with predictions or knowing something that you don't know. It's just we spend all of our time being a little bit early, okay? I used to be in the startup business, starting companies, and I was always 10 years early, which is not so good when you start a company. But as an advisor, it's a good thing. And there's an interesting saying, the guy who started IBM, Thomas Watson, and now the Watson machine named after him, he said, I think there's a world market for 5 computers. That's what he said in 1943. So one thing that's really important is to get ready for the future is to have what I call foresights, okay? In other words, if you're sitting here today, you're thinking about how you're going to sell or offer music tomorrow, but it's not very helpful to think of iTunes, right? Because iTunes is here now. Right? What is coming after iTunes? What is coming after Spotify? There's a saying about if we had asked Henry Ford if people had asked him, no, other way around. If Henry Ford had asked people what they wanted, they would have said they want faster horses, right? Because they only knew horses. But he built a car. So our job, because things are moving really fast, is to pay attention to the next thing. And in a way, you could say that this is really my job. I'm listening to stuff that goes on. And then I try to help companies. I advise over 100 companies worldwide, from Sony to Google, YouTube, many others, but mostly in the content sectors. All of my books and publications are free except for my first book, which is published through Berkeley, The Future of Music. So if you just go to Google and put my name, Gert, and free PDFs, you find everything. Okay? I have 5 books available, more or less for free. You can also buy them at Amazon if you want the debt-free version. I have a Kindle app and an iPhone app and so on. So we'll go into that later. Anyway, this is sort of an overview of my books. My latest book is called The Future of Content, which is $3 on Amazon Kindle. And Saving Trees, there's no PDFs, no printing available. And my iPhone app, just look for Futurist. You'll be able to watch all my stuff from there. So I want to start here. This is an important topic, right? There's Julian from WikiLeaks, and Julian says, I give private information on corporations to you for free, and I'm the villain, the bad guy. And Mark from Facebook says, I give your private information to corporations for money, I'm man of the year. So this is a good sign that we live in very confusing times. Right? Sometimes we don't know what's what. In America, a couple of weeks ago, we were discussing a law that would make it illegal for companies, if they had any possible infringement, even JPEGs, PDFs, whatever, it would have been possible to shut down the websites on a day's notice without a trial. We have a lot of confusion about what's what, right? Who should get paid for what and who should pay and so on. These are confusing times, primarily because we're now getting connected on a global level. And Steve Jobs, rest in peace, he said a lot of really smart things. I mean, he was a very special character, so it's impossible to emulate Steve Jobs. Don't try. But one thing he said about his life says he wants to put a ding in the universe. Okay. Now, I was looking at the title of this presentation saying, like, really, if you're thinking about how you can make a living with music in a digital world, right? Well, you have to start by making a ding, by creating something that's just you. Right? In other words, just because we have the internet doesn't mean you're going to automatically make more money if people can download your stuff or find you, right? You have to be special. I mean, look at what's really successful today. It's all stuff that's highly special, that's niches, that people are excited about. Look at the successful brands that we have today, right? They all make a ding into the universe, as Steve has said. So I think this is a very important paradigm to consider. Now, in this society, what I call the networked society, and most of you are young enough to know what this means, right? I'm 50, so I grew up, when I was a musician and producer a long time ago. I went to Berklee College and I had a career as a musician. There was no internet. We would have to send out a CD to get a gig. We have to make a phone call to call people up. There was no way to reach out to people. There was no way to be found except for in the mail or in Billboard magazine, which already existed back then. Today, in the networked society, we're living in a whole different world. Okay? This head sort of explains what that world is. It's essentially a connection of wheels. Everything is interconnected. Okay. This also means that we don't exist by ourselves, right? Walt Disney, Universal Music, to start companies like that today would be impossible, right? Because they're one big wheel. They're not like this, right? I mean, there are independent companies who control production, distribution, marketing. All of these things is part of what they do. Right? Microsoft is a company that is more like this now, but started as a company as one big wheel. So now we're living in a society that's completely interconnected. So I can guarantee you will not make money with music in the future if we don't work out a deal with Google or with the telecom companies or the advertisers, the device makers. It won't work. Right? This is a moving part. It's an ecosystem. Okay? So one of the things that we need to work on is to get off this idea of saying that, we won't talk to you, we won't allow you to use the music, and therefore we make more money. This is a complete illusion. Right? I mean, music industry is now basically one of those wheels, and it's a very small wheel. Right? To be exact, $15.7 billion. You know how big the telecom economy is? Anybody have any idea? Mobile phones, operators? Right? 3.7 trillion a year. So that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.5% of what they do. Right? $350 million a day spent on SMS. Right? So the music industry is now part of a much larger story. But a very important story with music, right? Because creativity is emotion, is what drives a lot of things, and music is all about that. So in a networked society, we can't say, if we don't like this, we don't play. Right? If this wheel here does not correspond with the other wheels, what happens if, of course, the other wheels disconnect and continue? And that's what we see now. We have to connect with the other wheels. We cannot afford to say, well, we don't play ball because we don't make enough money from you guys yet. I mean, the idea of saying that you will not license Spotify because you're not making enough money yet is suicide, right? I mean, think about the logic. If you had said 70 or 80 years ago or 100 years ago that you would not license radio because it's free, that's bad, and B, is not paying enough, then you would have killed the very mechanism that made music the biggest phenomenon in the 60s and 70s, which was radio. Right? We need to give permission to try stuff. Otherwise, we're always going to stop what can innovate us. So this is a very, very big problem in the music business, is that we ask too early for too much, and we kill innovation. I checked the other day, there's 778 companies who tried to innovate in music, they're dead. Right? 2 of them were mine, by the way. But just a couple of days ago, Beyond Oblivion, a New York-based company, filed for bankruptcy, right? The latest in the attempt to innovate the music business, right? Because we're not giving enough permission. We're not giving enough way to actually build this, right? Now artists are saying, well, Spotify, I get whatever, 1 billion plays, I only get $100. Well, that's not good, clearly. But Spotify has 3 million users, paying users, right? Let's have Spotify have 1 billion users, right? How much money are you going to make for this? Let's get YouTube to have 2 billion active users, right? Share the advertising money with you. YouTube can make several billion a month in advertising. Then we see real money, right? So let's not be too quick with saying that we don't allow things to nurture. It's like saying your baby grows up being a PhD. No, it's a baby first. You have to grow it, right? You have to actually allow it to move. So in this world now, the digital world, we're soon going to add the other 3 billion, the Brazilians, the Indonesians, the Chinese, and they're moving much, much quicker with everything than we've ever seen. Right? In India, you have people connecting to the internet now that never had radio or television. And now they're watching YouTube on their mobile phones. I mean, what better opportunity could we have as artists to reach those people, to sell them our commercials, to make music for them, right, to distribute to them, to do tours there, and vice versa. They here, right? Both directions. So there, the rules of the game are completely different. Right? The rules of the game of how you pay for music are not going to work there. And this has nothing to do with copyright. This is just reality. Right? So we take the word copyright. We'll talk about that later. I think we need to remove the first part, which is the copy. Everything that we do on the internet makes a copy. Right? You play a song on YouTube, you are in fact making a copy on the cache of your computer. In fact, if you use a download helper extension on Firefox, you can keep that copy. That's what kids do now to get music. Right? It's simple. Every stream, every click, every copy, every forward, every email creates copy of music, and most of that is not legal in parentheses, right? But it happens anyway. So we have hundreds of companies who have used this idea of saying, well, basically it's the same. Streaming and copying is the same thing. We don't live in a copy economy. So if you're a lawyer, you're in deep trouble, right? Because the entire setup depends on saying that you have copies, you have radio, which is free, you've got this whole system, right? But the internet blows away this idea of saying, what we think is actually happening. The most popular way of sharing music today on the internet is not file sharing, right? Is not those programs like LimeWire and what have you. Right? It's basically people sending stuff back and forth on YouTube and ripping what's on YouTube. Right? Just recording it, so to speak, which is not per se illegal. In some countries it could be. But anyway, we have 3 billion people connecting, and they will call the shots. Right? They will tell us how much they're willing to pay. And I have to tell you, if I find another person who's going to tell me that people aren't willing to pay for content, I think I'll throw up. Right? I mean, if you look at the global trends, people are paying everywhere for content. Right? They're paying for dating, which is content, right? That's database. They're paying for LinkedIn. You guys on LinkedIn? $550 million. We are the content of LinkedIn, right? They're paying for Netflix, 24 million subscribers, paying $10. And they're paying for Farmville, $450 million last year. They're paying $6.8 billion for virtual products, Flowers. They're paying for iPhone apps. Right? So don't tell me they're not paying for content. Right? This is just not true. But we're asking them to pay in a way that's a punishment. Right? We have to get engaged with what people actually want to do. And this is what's going to happen in the very near future. You guys are lucky that you're actually at the end of this period in terms of how this all is coming together. Okay, the digital natives. This is a baby. Are you going to play or what? Start playing. It's not playing. Sorry. I gave away the whole point of my video. Anyway, here's a baby, okay? You can check it out on YouTube yourself. But iPads are very popular with kids, small kids, right? Because you can touch them and do stuff. They learn in a very short time that you can paint, you can create things, and you can make a photo, or you can use photo booth. They learn all these things, right? And then you have this shot here over on the other side basically showed a baby saying, okay, I'm going to use a real magazine, as you can see here, and she's trying to zoom the page of the real magazine, right? And these are digital natives. They're completely different assumption of what happens here, right? I mean, of course, she's just a baby, but when you're 10 years old with this sort of mindset, if you can't interact and you can't just make it work, you're not interested. You don't exist. Right? In other words, if we make these people in the future stick to the old rules from 20 years ago, we're toast, right? We're not going to even be considered. So we have to think about digital natives, what people do on the internet in the future, going forward. And one of those important things that you should get used to is cloud computing. Right? And not in the Apple way, but in the general way. Right? What's happening is that all content is moving into the cloud. And we discussed this in 1999 with mp3.com and Napster, right? It was the same idea. Right? But now all content is moving into the cloud. That means music, television, films, education. BerkeleyMusic.com, right? The biggest online music school in the world, is online. Right? Health records, banking, money. Scary thought, of course. If it all moves in the cloud, we can be, in theory, we can be tracked, right? Which is a scary thought, right? But it will happen anyway. We won't be using credit cards in 10 to 15 years, depending on the country, even earlier. We won't be buying textbooks. For universities, we'll have a device that has all the textbooks coming through the cloud. Right? And this is, in the music business, this is our chance to get to those people on the other end of the cloud. Right? Because guess what? If we do this, our costs are next to zero. The only cost we have here is an attention cost. Right? We have to actually make sure that they come to us. Right? That is the real cost. So it's been said many times before, also the speech before here, that attention is the currency. If in this cloud I have 68 million songs, right, how in the world is anybody going to pay attention to you? Of course, you have to be in the cloud. Nothing you can do about it not to be in the cloud, but you have to find a way to actually get to people and to connect with them to see what they want to do. Right? And they will do it on mobile devices, right? Primarily on mobile devices. If you have a question, just please fire away, okay? So, the future of music is the cloud and the crowd. There's only two things that matter was said already 50 times this week in the conferences, right? Remember this, there's only two things that matter, okay? One is the creator, and the other one is the so-called consumer, the user, okay? We're up for debate in between. Sorry to tell you, but in a digital economy, it's the creator that matters because only they can create, and it's not going to be any better because they have software, right? It's still going to be a process of human creation. And the consumer. And if you're looking at some of these services, you guys know Flipboard, right? A really amazing way to read news. Spotify, Simfy, Instapaper, BBC iPlayer, right? What does this tell you? The content moves to the cloud. We use software to access it. Right? And the connection of the cloud and the crowd is the money. Right? And this is why the new players in the music business will not be the labels or the societies, because there are middlemen. Right? They will be people who make that connection between the cloud and the crowd. Right? The search engines, the social networks. Right? Facebook goes public sometime this week. Right? They will have a $100 billion war chest to do this. $100 billion. You know how much Vodafone has for innovation? Right? The entire budget for innovation, I think it's something like 16 billion. Right? And Facebook has 100 billion. Right? And no costs, right? They don't have a network. They just make software. So when you think about this, right, basically we need to figure out how we can get in this process of the cloud and the crowd. And the important part here is, of course, filtering. I mean, I'm not interested in all of the music from Indonesia. I just want the particular music I'm interested in or that's recommended by my friends, right? Because when you buy stuff, 96% of people buy through social recommendation. And that's on the internet even more pronounced. We buy what somebody else has said that they also bought. Right? That is the process of how we do stuff. Right? This is why when I'm on Facebook and I play Spotify track and it shows up on Facebook, I get like emails, people saying, oh, I really like the song that you published through Spotify on Facebook, and I bought it, or I bought the concert ticket, or, right? This is social commerce. So the thing is, if we don't allow to be in the cloud, right? Or if we make it too difficult, or if we put all these rules, for example, as iTunes does, that you start watching and 24 hours later your movie is gone, right? We're pissing off the people who are giving us the money. Right? I mean, this is like going in an airplane, and when you come in, they will say, you know what, you can only stand. Because, we figured that you're healthy. Right? It makes no sense whatsoever. So there, when 5 billion people are connected to the global network, right? I mean, right now we have about 2 billion. In reality, it's really only 1 billion who have high-speed internet access, even less who are actually active. Right? So in 5 years, we have 5 billion people. Right now, the world is about 7 billion. Okay? So think about the huge opportunity for us to reach those people, but also to create business that doesn't cost anything to facilitate, except for attention. When I got started on LinkedIn, you guys are on LinkedIn, right? We can connect. I'm G. Leonhardt there. When I started on LinkedIn, my buddy Ray Hoffman in those days started it. I was number 8,000. Okay, today is 178 million on LinkedIn. I sent emails to my friends, mostly in the music business, saying we should connect so we can talk about important stuff and also develop business, right? You know what the answer was? I said, why in the world should I connect with strangers to talk about stuff? If you're not already with me, I don't want to do business with you. Right? I want to keep behind the wall. And what we do is a club, right? You're not in the club, you're out the club, right? It's that simple, right? Well, guess what today? We're all in the same boat, right? The same CEOs who wouldn't take my LinkedIn request, they're asking me for recommendation today on LinkedIn. Right? They're coming to the same point where we're saying, if you're not connected, you're dead. So the first step you should do today is to network with everybody in the room to help each other how to figure out how to solve these problems. Right? Because these are collective problems, they're not singular problems. Right? So whether you're a writer or a musician or a label or a publisher, we all have the same problem, which is how to get attention. Right? That is our basic problem. Right? And because when we have attention, we can monetize. Okay, very important point, right? You've seen the Maslow need hierarchy. Maslow is a sociologist who said basically we have the human needs are physiological safety, belonging, esteem, self-actualization, and sex is somewhere in there as well. It's a very simple pyramid. You go up the pyramid until you have more room. Then you say, well, now I want self-realization, right? But today, in a digital economy, it's also changed in that we have food, shelter, and the top of the pyramid is the mobile phone. Right? I mean, it's amazing how you can see in Brazil or in Africa, when people have $5 more, you know what they're going to do? They're going to buy a mobile phone. Right? They're going to top up the phone to make calls. Right? This is the digital economy. Right? This is the same people that we're going to sell to. Because when they have a mobile phone, we can reach them. So another thing you should do tomorrow when you come to the office, everything you do needs to be available for mobile formats. And I'm not talking about apps for downloading. Right? Mobile versions of your website. It will take you a day to do this. Google has free tools for this, to turn your site into a mobile site. There's an Israeli company called Conduit Mobile. They've just launched here at Medium that do a really great web app for free. And there's many more like MoFuse and many others, right? So if your website isn't mobile, you're making a big mistake because most of the people in the future will be using mobile devices to look at your stuff. They will not be using computers, right? The CEO of Google, the former CEO now, Eric Schmidt, 3 years ago, he said that basically everything, the first step is mobile. Okay, think about the beauty of this. If you go to my website about my Music 2.0 book called Future of, it's called musicfutures.com. I keep forgetting my own URLs. I have too many. Musicfutures.com, okay? This is a place I put up where you can go with any mobile phone, and it cost me like $5 to do this. And you can read my whole book on the mobile phone. Okay. Last year, most of my traffic in regards to all these things came from the mobile sites and from this site, people reading a very simple $5 site saying they can read it on the BlackBerry, they can read it worldwide, they can download the PDF, they can do all these things there. Right? So if you have a label or an artist or a publisher, if you're a composer, you have to have a mobile site. Because that's where all the action is going to be. Clearly, the future is mobile. And, think of your world like this, mobile first. Okay. Don't forget, in America, for example, we're stuck with the computer because we have the money to buy one and it's a safe place to put one, right? That's not the case in India or Brazil, right? There's often no power. There's not a safe place to put them. And then there's water problems and what have you, right? It's all mobile devices. It's all mobile internet devices. So if you want to reach the other 3 billion, as we call them, you got to switch to the mobile. If you don't know what this is, who knows what this is? Great improvement. It's a QR code. In fact, you can zap it right now if you want. But this is a shortcut. This is a shortcut to one of my ideas of paying with attention. Actually, if you click on this, it takes you to payingwithattention.com, which is a bunch of stuff about how that works. Okay? It's a shortcut. This is widely used in Asia, for example. Now we have people with radio frequency ID chips and with near-field communications where you have shortcuts to assets. Right? For example, for bands, this is the most direct way. When you play a gig, you put up a poster with the code. People can take the mobile, they make a photo, the photo connects to the website, boom, you're there. Right? Don't have to remember anything, just make a photo. In fact, now there's bands playing with the QR code as a T-shirt. For that reason. So, I mean, clearly that is a sort of a shortcut and a simple